They came without warning. No messengers, no sirens, no orders to flee. Just marching SS soldiers armed with machine guns and the lie of a routine check. By sunset, the streets were soaked in blood, smoke, and silence. The church in flames, the school empty, the people gone forever. "643 men, women, and children were massacred in a single afternoon. Not soldiers, not fighters, ordinary lives, exterminated. Their village wiped from the map. It was the greatest massacre committed on French soil during World War II. Oradour means place of prayer. Oradour-sur-Glane was a beautiful, quiet village in the Limousin countryside of France dating back to the 11th century. Idyllic and beautiful, home to farmers, mechanics, teachers, merchants, and bankers. The town had a tram line, a church, a post office, schools, cafes, hotels, and popular restaurants. It was an important hub of commerce where monthly fairs were vital to the village economy. Every August, Oradour hosted a large festival that attracted people from all surrounding towns. There was a soccer team, a music society founded in 1886, and regular formal dances attended by the locals. It was a village with a rich history and a vibrant culture. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Though France had suffered under Nazi occupation since 1940, Oradour remained untouched. No German raids, no arrests, no conflict, not even a resistance safe house. The Germans passed through here only once in 1942, on their way to somewhere else. It was a peaceful place, so safe, in fact, that refugees from Spain and elsewhere in France came here, seeking shelter from the war and the Nazis. And Oradour welcomed them. By 1944, Oradour was a village trying to get by despite the deprivations of the war. It seemed as if Oradour would survive the war untouched. Everything changed when the Allies landed in Normandy on June 6, 1944. Four days later, on June 10th, the 3rd Company of the SS Der Führer Regiment, part of the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, was on its way to Normandy to help stop the Allied advance. But first, they made a detour to Oradour. The commanding officer was SS Major Adolf Diekmann, a cruel, battle-tested, fervent Nazi. His second in command was Captain Otto Kahn. Before they entered the town, Kahn's subordinate, 2nd Lieutenant Heinz Barth, addressed his men. "Today you will see blood flow." The SS quickly surrounded the village and rounded up the population. They told the people it was just a routine security inspection, a check for ID cards, maybe hidden weapons. Calmly, they ordered everyone to the town square and instructed the teachers to gather their students. At around 2 p.m., they began separating the villagers. The men, roughly 200 of them, were split into groups and taken to barns and garages. The women and children were marched to the church.
Before we knew it, it was full of women and children. School children and toddlers of all ages were squashed up close to mothers who had pushed prams into that sacred place. Marguerite Roufanche.
Nervous mothers did their best to reassure their children, whispering that everything would be fine, that it was just a routine check, nothing more. In the barns and garages, the men waited calmly at first, talking among themselves, discussing what was going on. They knew they'd been separated into 5 groups, but no one knew why. Then they saw the machine guns being set up, soldiers taking positions. And the calm turned to fear. Around 4 p.m., the SS opened fire. It was a slaughter. The men fell in waves, falling over one another in tangled, bleeding heaps. Gunfire ripped through the barns and garages, echoing off stone walls, across streets and fields. Oradour was filled with screams, bullets, and the chaos of mass murder.
The injured were crying out, howling, some calling for their wives and children. Seeing this, the Germans climbed onto the bodies to finish them off with a revolver. Ivan Robbie.
Then the soldiers soaked the wounded and the dying in fuel and lit the match. Some of the wounded, unable to move and escape, were burned alive.
The cries of pain, the heat, the smell of blood mingled with that of hay, dust, and powder turned the barn into hell on earth. Robert Ibra.
Robert Ibra was a 19-year-old mechanic born and raised in Oradour. Burned and bleeding, he survived by crawling out under cover of corpses. He would later find out that his mother and 2 sisters were killed. Inside the church, 247 women and 205 children were trapped. As they heard machine gun fire coming from the barns, the SS ignited a gas bomb inside the nave and locked the doors. When the gas bomb exploded, the women and children started suffocating. In panic, they rushed the windows and doors. When one of the doors broke down, the SS began firing through the windows and doors.
The Germans saw that people had escaped into the room and cold-bloodedly shot down everyone who was hiding there. My daughter was killed where she stood by a shot fired from outside. I owe my life to my closing my eyes and feigning dead.
Once the gas had done its job, the soldiers walked in through the main door and shot those still alive. When the screaming stopped, the SS threw straw, firewood, and chairs over the bodies, and burned them. The flames were so intense that they melted the church bell.
The fire was spreading rapidly. I stood it for as long as I could, sheltering under the bodies of those who had already breathed their last. Marguerite Roufanche.
Though badly wounded, Marguerite Roufanche managed to climb a stepladder and jump from a 10-foot high window. She then dragged herself to the fields and hid. Among the women and children trapped in the church, she was the only one to survive. But she had witnessed her 2 daughters and grandson murdered inside the church. Her husband and son were killed in one of the barns. She lost everything. Close to 500 women and children were massacred in the church in less than an hour. 62 children were under the age of 6. The youngest was only a week old. Whole families died together, clutching one another in the smoke. Anybody who was unfortunate enough to travel to Oradour that day was summarily executed. Cyclists, tram engineers, neighbors from surrounding villages who were passing by, and parents who came to look for their children were all murdered. All in a single afternoon. Later, bodies were found all over the village. In a well, in a bakery oven, in a ditch by the road. By the time the SS left, every home was burning. No house or building among the town's 160 was spared. The village doctor, the baker, the priest, the midwife, the mayor, the teachers, refugees, the tailor, were all dead. Only 6 men survived the massacre in the barns. The only child to survive was 8-year-old Roger Godefroy. As a refugee, he knew what the Germans were capable of, and the moment he saw them arrive, he ran. Hiding in the fields, he survived. When the first villagers returned the next morning, the smoke from the fire and the smell of charred bodies still hung in the air.
Our homes, our families, our past had vanished from the face of the earth. Robert Hibra.
The destruction was so absolute, the killing so brutal, that identifying the dead was nearly impossible. Charred bodies lay where they fell, burned beyond recognition. Survivors and relatives were left to search through the ruins, uncover makeshift graves, and begin the painful task of burying their dead. Many weren't able to identify their loved ones and give them a proper burial.
Those who entered the church staggered back, overcome with horror. 2 entwined bodies, which seemed to have been spared by the flames, crumbled to dust at a touch. 2 children, hand in hand, had sought refuge in a church confessional. Their baby faces still wore that look of endearing innocence that only children know. Robert Hibra.
Entire families were wiped out, generations erased in a few hours. No survivor was left untouched. Marguerite Villager had been warned not to return to the village, but she went anyway, desperate to find her husband and sons.
I could not believe my eyes. It was more madness than I ever wanted to see. In this hell I lost my husband, my 4 sons, and my house. And now I have to have courage to simply live. Marguerite Villagy.
No one truly knows why Oradour was singled out. In the years that followed, accusations and theories spread. The Germans claimed it was a justified retaliation, that resistance fighters had killed 2 SS soldiers and an officer nearby, or that the village was hiding weapons for the resistance. But there was no evidence to support any of it. Oradour had no ties to the resistance. It was peaceful, quiet. It offered no threat. It was simply on the way, easy to surround, easier to destroy. And that's what makes it even more unbearable. Not just the violence, but the ease of it. A village wiped out, not because of what it had done, but because it was just there. After the war in 1953, 21 men were brought to trial. Most were Alsatians, French citizens forcibly conscripted into the SS. The trial divided France. Some viewed the French soldiers as traitors, others as victims of Nazi coercion. Pardons were issued, convictions overturned. This created a rift between the village of Oradour and the French government that lasted 17 years. The officers who ordered the massacre, for years they escaped justice. General Heinz Lammerding, who commanded the division responsible, lived openly in Germany, first under British occupation and later in what became West Germany. Though sentenced to death in absentia by a French court for another atrocity, the execution of 99 hostages in Toul, he was never extradited. Despite the French government's requests, the British and later the West Germans refused to extradite him to France. He died a free man, never facing trial for Oradour. Major Adolf Dieckmann, who led the SS unit that carried out the massacre, was killed in Normandy just weeks later. His second-in-command, Captain Otto Kahn, disappeared without a trace and was long presumed dead. But it turned out he was alive, well and free in West Germany until his death in 1977. After living under his own name for decades in East Germany, Second Lieutenant Heinz Barth was tried in East Germany in 1983 and sentenced to life in prison. But he was released in 1997 due to ill health. Incredibly, he went on to live for another 10 years. No senior SS officer was ever punished for Oradour. Justice was never truly served. When he visited the village the year after the massacre, General Charles de Gaulle made a decision. Oradour-sur-Glane would never be rebuilt. The ruins would remain untouched as a national monument. A memorial to the town's martyrdom and a reminder of Nazi atrocities.
Oradour-sur-Glane is a symbol of the calamities of the country. Her memory must be kept alive, for a similar calamity must never occur again. Charles de Gaulle.
Today, visitors walk through the silence. A pram still sits in the church. The doctor's burned car remains where he parked it. A sewing machine rests beside a scorched doorway, frozen in time. The new village was built nearby, but the old one stands as it was left, a devastating monument to martyrdom. Oradour-sur-Glane wasn't a battlefield. It was a massacre, a warning sent in fire and violence. 643 innocent lives erased. A village destroyed, not for strategy, not for retaliation, but for fear and control. 80 years later, Oradour speaks through silence, asking us to remember, while its ruins stand as a monument to the victims, demanding our respect and sorrow.